Hello, everybody. Welcome to CripChat, your weekly podcast for everything disability. Today I have with me Jonathan Shar, Ibby,
Hello.
Andrew Bretherton, and myself, David D. Today we'll be talking about the NDIS reform bill and the changes. And please like and share. If you got any questions, please fill it in the comment box. Over to you, Ibby.
Thank you very much, David, and welcome everyone to CripChat, your weekly podcast on everything disability. And welcome back, Andrew. It's good to have you back. So,
G'day.
Andrew, let's get into this. Okay, so Andrew, this week the NDIS reform bill passed the Parliament. So, could you please outline the main elements of the legislation and focus on the potential harm it will cause the disability community?
So some of the main changes to this NDIS bill is the removal of protections we had under the old bill, which we saw with the previous government that had tried to introduce before the last election. And the Labor government at the time had promised that there would be no cuts to the NDIS, there'll be no changes to the protections of the NDIS. Unfortunately, what has just passed in Parliament is a complete betrayal of the disability community, because it removes a lot of the protections we had under the old plan, and it subjects us to needs assessments to determine funding. Reasonable and necessary has been changed. We're now going to be put under budget changes rather than where we had flexible spending. We will now be subjected to government lists that are approved or not approved of what we can spend on funding. And the scariest thing of all with this bill is the protections for liability. So it's potentially Robo-Debt 2.0, where charges and debts can be incurred on the disabled person using the NDIS. And in the case of rorting the scheme that this bill has been, these changes have been made under that Labor's claiming, a provider could be rorting an NDIS participant, charging that participant for services that that NDIS participant never received. And then the NDIS participant could potentially be liable for a debt raised against them to pay back, even though they never received the services or never asked to receive the services. So scary stuff.
Yeah, indeed, scary.
Do you think?
Thank you for that.
That's all right.
Sorry, David here. Do you think if they are given high prices now for services and we get less for our services to do you think they'll lower the prices?
Well, from what I've seen of the bill, nowhere in this bill does it address price gouging and going after providers that are rorting the scheme, apart from perhaps forcing them to become a registered provider to give services. Now, the problem with that is that removes a lot of choice and control from participants, where they may have been using an individual or non-registered service to provide them care, and then they're now having to force to use a registered provider that perhaps doesn't know them as well, or in the case of some registered providers, we know a lot of the big providers are the ones implementing the abuse on disabled people. So it kind of removes that choice from disabled people to say, hey, well, look, I don't want to go with this big provider that's had a lot of claims made against them. I want to stay with my independent sole trader. But instead of staying with an independent sole trader who is perhaps cheaper than some of the big providers, we're now forced to go to a registered provider that may have been under some of these abuse claims that were brought up in the Disability Royal Commission. A lot of fear mongering was done with this bill, saying that we need to crack down on rorting and price gouging of the scheme. But unfortunately, nowhere in this bill does it address that. And in this case, it reduces choice and control where a disabled person could have chosen a cheaper provider or a cheaper place to claim a service from, and forces them to use a bigger provider that will charge more and price gouge them more. So it does the opposite of what it's claiming.
Interesting. Now, thank you for that, Andrew. So, as disability advocates, what are your main concerns about the bill? The establishment of support lists and the lack of genuine co-design.
Well, in the case of that, co-design was promised but wasn't delivered. I'm currently a board member for the Disability Resource Centre, and we also run a disability community service called Belong. And in terms of co-design, we submitted a report to the government saying no against the bill and the concerns we had against this bill. And I don't believe we got a response from the government. And I know a lot of other disability advocacy communities had also written in their concerns about this bill and didn't receive a response, or were given time to make amendments. And with the supported lists, unfortunately, like a lot of disability advocacy services, a lot of us have been underfunded by the government and haven't been promised funds for this next round of government funding. So we have advocacy services that are understaffed, under-resourced, and unprepared to respond to a lot of the stuff the government was asking for us. And I think Jordan Steele John said it in Parliament the other week. You know, there's milk in my fridge that's, you know, has a longer expiry date than our disability advocacy services were given to respond to the bill and to respond to the lists. And in terms of the DRC, we didn't have the resources to even respond to the supported list thing that they were asking us for, because initially we were given 2 weeks and then they brought the bill up earlier. So we didn't even get time to submit the problems we had with the supported lists. So Labor and the people that have supported Labor with passing this bill have promised co-design, but in nowhere there is co-design in this bill. And it's very interesting that Kurt Fearnley hasn't come out in support of this bill, being the head of the NDIS or any of the Disability Royal Commission commissioners, because there's, as I said at the start, co-design was promised, but it wasn't delivered or indeed heard.
Yeah. It's time, isn't it? Thank you for that, Andrew. Andrew, how does it feel when the voices of the disability advocacy community are not being heard in my policies that will affect our lives?
It feels like we're just a political football. I personally, before the election, had campaigned with politicians and was at the speech of every Australian counts to get Bill Shorten re-elected. And all these promises were made that, we're not going to go through with the LNP's cuts. We're not going to go through with their plans for needs assessments. We're not going to dehumanize you. And it feels like we've been completely lied to. And it feels like our community doesn't matter to them. There is no disability justice. There's no rights for us. Basically, it feels like they want a surplus, and how they're going to get this surplus is from the disability community, and that our needs and our rights and our disability justice movement doesn't matter at all. Where we can be brushed aside, and I do think this bill will lead to irreparable harm to the disability community, and it will lead to deaths. And yeah, it just feels like our lives and our rights don't matter. It's profits over people.
Yeah, no, it's awful to hear that, considering the amount of work, us disability advocates for, in bringing change to, the way that people's lives are being treated. It's look, we do so much, we expect, a great outcome.
Yeah, exactly. And
It's sad to
a
see
lot of this advocacy takes a lot of not only our time but our health, our capacity to engage in the community. And we have to sacrifice and fight for that every single time, for the basic rights able-bodied people take for granted. And it feels like our voices and our basic rights, our basic dignity, our basic, necessities to live don't matter.
It's all about money.
exactly. Like Andrew said, but well said. Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Andrew. And so, moving on to the next question. Uh, Yep. So, do you see the legislation as compounding the entrenched inequality found by the Disability Royal Commission?
Oh, 100%. And it's incredibly disappointing that this Labor government ignored the recommendations from the Disability Royal Commission. I believe only 6% of the recommendations were actually accepted by the government. When you compare that to the Aged Care Royal Commission, I think it was something like 70 or 80% of the recommendations passed straight away. And what this bill does by removing choice and control and removing protections and the right to, the right to appeal in a decision, it classifies disabled people into different categories. So for myself, I have a lot of invisible disabilities. And what I'm incredibly scared of from this bill is this move to what the government's calling foundational supports. So as an autistic and as a person with ME/CFS, the government is looking to make cuts and remove people from the scheme. And autistics and people with chronic illnesses are probably one of the first targets. And it's been this view of able-bodied people and people in government that people with chronic illnesses aren't as disabled or as deserving as possibly other disabled people. And it competes the disability community against each other rather than joining us together, because we've got some people, it's saying some people are deserving of support while others are not. And if you want to be deserving of this support, you need to meet X, X, Y, Z criteria. And if you don't meet that criteria, then sorry, we can't help you. And with the foundational supports, a lot of those foundational supports were removed when the NDIS was first set up. It was a move away from the states. It was a move away from segregation, group homes, and we're going to see a lot of that coming back now. So for the disability rights movement in Australia, it's a huge blow, and it's a huge step backwards to where we were, especially in terms of disability justice. So yeah, we will see a lot of people that were getting the supports and capacity that they needed no longer getting those supports and being put into situations where they're more at risk.
I got a feeling a lot of people are gonna start needing new documentation to show that their disabilities they have it, and some people are gonna be rejected because of their disability and not work.
In the case of my disability with MECFS, there's less than 5% in Australia that actually qualify for the NDIS. So it's going to see a lot of those people removed, and a lot of other people with lesser known disabilities removed. But you've got to remember, if you compare this scheme to, say, the aged care scheme,
Yeah.
people on aged care don't need to prove every year that they're old, you know? And disabled people shouldn't have to prove every year that they still need these supports, that they're still
See,
disabled. You know, once we
see,
qualify,
see,
that's it. If they want to
see,
save money, stop the assessment.
the thing
Why
is,
did you main purpose of the NDIS to move away from this welfare mentality to create a rights-based model. Yes, creating that rights-based model is what the NDIS was intended to do, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's going away from that.
And again, I go back to my
But when
original
you look
point with
at the
aged.
statistics,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, sorry, Greg.
I go back to my original point with aged care. Everyone will become old at some point. The NDIS is set up so that if anyone falls on the circumstances that they were born with a disability or somehow become impaired with a disability at any stage of their life, that they would be looked after and they would be able to live and have the same quality of life as everybody else, just like we do in aged care. This isn't a revolutionary idea. This should already be within every government system to ensure everyone is protected and everyone is looked after. Able-bodied people seem to have this belief that, oh, well, it will never happen to me. I'll never get disabled. I never thought I'd get MECFS, but I did. You know, this is a basic right that should be already there, you know, and it feels like they're ripping that away.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. What's wrong with that, Andrew? But also, when you talk about these statistics, 5%, of people that have CSF considered with NDIS, and also like 6% of the recommendations are put through. That's a very low number. That is very, very low. I think more work needs to be done. But anyway, thank you, Andrew. How will the prescriptive nature of support lists adversely impact participants' quality of life?
A lot. I think this supported list just shows how the government innately does not understand how disability works. Um, it's like having government issued clogs and saying we all need to wear the same style of shoe and same size shoe when everyone may have a different foot size or a different foot arch or whatever. And that's the ridiculousness of this supported list because everyone experiences disability in a different way. What what the government may consider an everyday item, say, for example, I had a dishwasher funded by the NDIS. For me, that is assistive technology. That saves me from having to use a support worker to come in on the weekend to come wash my dishes and saves me from using the limited energy I have so I can, instead of wasting that on doing that, I can actually go out and participate in the community and do stuff like this. That dishwasher for me is assistive technology. A robot vacuum might be an assistive technology to someone else. Having a fridge next to their bed, for example, might be assistive technology because they don't need to get up out of their room, out of their bed, and put themselves at a fool's risk. Period products, I think, were one of the things on the list. If you have MS or cerebral palsy or a disability where you may be bedbound, having a period panties, for example, or a different period product to what an able-bodied person would use, that's a disability assistive technology. By putting it on a supported list, the government said, what I've said before, that some disabilities are more deserving than others, or, we believe certain disabilities aren't as in need as other disabilities. But the thing that they don't know about the disability justice movement is none of us are free until all of us are free. So it's going to cause a lot of trouble, and really it's just profits over people at the end of the day.
That's a sad truth, huh? Profit over people. So, move on to the next question. Thank you very much, Andrew, for that. Why are disability advocates opposed to elements of this legislation?
I think that relates to some of the answers I was giving at the start. It removes a lot of choice and control. It puts disabled people in a position where they're having to re-traumatize and reprove their disability to the government for basic items or basic needs. It removes a lot of flexibility and takes a lot of choice, takes a lot of individualization out of the disabled person's hands and gives the minister godlike powers over the NDIS. So instead of the disabled person saying nothing about us without us, these are the support needs I need to live and survive, it puts it in the hands of an able-bodied politician that has no lived experience of disability, or an able-bodied bureaucrat within the NDIS that might not know a disabled person's needs, and leaves it in their hands rather than in the hands of the person that knows their needs the most. And again, compare this to aged care. A person on the aged care scheme can request supports and stuff without having to prove this to the government. But for disabled people, there seems to be this insidious thing that, we're all faking it, or we're all trying to rort the scheme, or we're not as deserving as, say, someone on the aged care scheme, for example. So that's just one of the elements. Yeah, but I could talk about that all day.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can. Now, thank you for sharing, Andrew. I will on to the next question. And so, how does the NDIS reform bill limit the potential of the scheme to promote a more inclusive society?
I think the biggest aspect is it removes co-design. How can we have a more inclusive in society when we can't even get a say in the services that are provided to us or the legislation that's given to us? A lot of the changes proposed in this, I think, from the top of my head, it was this removal from 1-to-1 supports to maybe 1-to-3 supports, which then leads into the issue of segregation, group homes, group care settings, rather than a person being able to live in their own home, have their own individuality, and contribute to society on their own. So it does the opposite of being inclusive. It's actually reclusive. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Reclusive. Oh, I just know. That's a new word I've learned. Reclusive. Thank you for that, Andrew. In the context of the current debate around the NDIS reform bill, how do your attitudes shape decisions on what NDIS funding should be allowed to be spent on?
Well, it has an over reliance on legislation and an over reliance on selective lists of what can and can't be approved. And as I said before, it gives godlike powers to bureaucrats and little recourse for the disabled person to appeal. So basically, it leaves it all in the hands of the government to shape the decisions on the disabled person's life. And I think if this was happening to able-bodied people, where the government would, and under the old bill, it was still very much like that, but not to this extent, And if able-bodied people found that they had to report their whole life, their whole story, and re-traumatize themselves each year with these assessments to tell the government basic needs, they'd be up in arms, or but to leave all of that in the hands of government officials, a lot of them not trained on disability, no, a lot of them not trained even in basic social work. It's just yeah, regressive.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Good one you mentioned. So Andrew, what methods of resistance are available to the disability community in advocating against the regressive reforms contained in the Bill Act?
I think at the moment, the most resistance is going to come from voting. So disabled people need to vote with, well, look at who voted on the bill and hold them accountable for passing that. Protesting, the DRC, we have a long history of protesting against a lot of ableism and ableist government decisions, such as our public transport campaign down here in Victoria. But yeah, I think back to what the disabled Americans did to get the Disability Rights Act passed, where they did the I think it was the Million Cripple Walk, where they got out of their chairs and walked up the stairs of Parliament. I think we need to see a lot more activism, a lot more protest, a lot more what's the word? Campaigning from the disability community, and we need to get disabled people in these key decision-making positions. We need to get more disabled people elected, so that bills like this can be blocked and not passed. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of work coming from the disability community and a lot of protest. And I heard there was a protest by the Sickos something Alliance at Bill Shorten's office sometime this week. But yeah, there needs to be a lot more protest, outrage, media coverage on this issue, and we need to make our voices heard because they're being ignored at the moment.
Oh yeah, interesting, Andrew. So, how can advocates more effectively communicate why this bill or act will exacerbate the violence, abuse, neglect, and exploitation faced by people with disabilities?
I think, again, we need to get our stories out there, but that also can be confronting for our community because it means re-traumatizing ourselves, not just to the media, but to politicians that don't care. We can do things like campaign in some of those key politicians that voted on this bill's electorate to make sure that they don't get re-elected. We just had a whole royal commission on this, and that royal commission was ignored. So I don't know. There needs to be some kind of protest movement. There needs to be more activism from the community, and if we look at other activist groups where they stop key parts of government or striking in certain areas, that may cause some division. But yeah, we need to make ourselves heard and we need to make ourselves seen. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that myself personally, but that would be some of the suggestions. Or just I think it's going to be a lot like Robo-Dead, where we will see deaths, we'll see more harm on the community, and we need to bring those stories forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing, Andrew. Is it irresponsible of the Labour government to pass the legislation without defining what foundational support are?
Oh, absolutely. Think about how when NDIS was first rolled out, we were given years to roll it out and years to work out the kinks and suggest alterations and all of this. This bill and these foundation supports have just been rammed through within less than 2 weeks. And no input from the disability community and no input from our key organizations. And I don't think I can even name one disability-led organization that agrees or said yes to this bill. So it is irreprehensibly irresponsible by this government to shove this through, especially when they removed a lot of these supports from the states when the NDIS was set up. And who's to say what these foundational supports are? The government at the moment, for my disabilities, which is autism and MECFS, they recommend abusive practices as foundational supports. an autistic person may be subjected to ABA under a state government, which is applied behavioral analysis. A person with ME/CFS will be under the abusive practices of graded exercise and CBT, which has been known to make people with long COVID and ME/CFS more disabled, because they're not listening to the disability community, and we're not making the decisions. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of harm passed from this.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Andrew. So, how does the NDIS reform bill amount to systemic ableism? And what are some practical methods of resistance to keep fighting for an inclusive society?
Well, the disability community always says nothing about us without us. And this reform bill was made without us, and it was about us. So you can't get any more ableist than that. We have ministers and politicians speaking for us and for our needs without knowing us or our needs or listening to us. It's basically this paternal kind of, father knows best approach to disabled people's lives. And it infantizes us. It basically says we're not capable to think or legislate these kind of things on our own. So, it goes back to that poor cripple kind of thing. We know what's best for you, we're going to do it our way, and if you don't like it, shut up. As for resistance, striking, one of the recommendations on the Disability Royal Commission was that we get paid at least 50% of the minimum wage, and that was rejected. So if I was in a one of those workplaces, I would be unionizing, collecting together, and striking. Also, going to key places of government and stopping, causing, similar to like we see with groups like Extinction Rebellion and that, causing disruption in parts of the government or in parts of society where people will go, well, fuck, why are all these disabled people causing a stoppage in public transport, let's say? What's going on? How can we stop this? And then people then go, oh, well, look at the injustice here. Or, going maybe to a key person's office and making it hard for them to maybe enter the building, or, just like the, I think it was the blind union. They held hands outside a workplace and stopped all people coming into the workplace. So we got to look back on our own history and start doing some of those disruptive actions. We do have power, and we need to implement it and use our voices and use our votes, most importantly.
Yes. Exactly. Spot on. Spot on. So how can listeners take practical steps to rally against this regressive and ableist legislation?
That's a very good question. I think the most powerful thing they can do is vote against some of the key senators and some of the key members that put this bill forward. if you're a Labor member, particularly, I would think of causing disruption within the Labor Party so that bills like this cannot be passed, and holding your leaders accountable. If you're not, or perhaps even leaving that organization in protest. Some of the other things they could do is join disabled rallies, promote disabled voices, bring bills and legislation to the government to hold them accountable for these things. One person can make a difference, and if you can build on that and build, we can hopefully fight against this and cause some change. But yeah, there needs to be some disruption. There needs to be more rallying calls. There needs to be more protests about this. And we need the media in particular to listen to us and to cover our point of view, because currently what I've seen in the media is, oh, well, we need to make these cuts, and these cuts are justified because it's from the disability community. And not realizing that this regressive bill affects able-bodied people as well. Think of the support workers, the support coordinators, all the jobs that are put at risk because of this bill for able-bodied people. And think, if you're an able-bodied person and you wake up with a disability tomorrow, either through sickness or injury, how are you going to be looked after? Or are you going to be made to force to jump through all the same hoops that we are and lose all the same rights that you experience as a privileged able-bodied person and lose them? Yeah.
Exactly. That people sorry, David, you had something to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say they're allowing the actual the the pension, like the old age stuff, go through. But why? Because we're all gonna go old,
Mm.
or is it because not everyone's disabled?
Well, everyone will experience disability at some point in their life, either through injury, illness, or old age.
Age.
So we need to stop thinking of disability of this thing of, well, it will never happen to me, because we will experience some form of disability. I mean, I can see Ibby's wearing glasses. A lot of able people wear glasses, and before we had that technology, if you didn't have clear vision, you were excluded from a lot of things from life. And now glasses aren't seen as a assistive technology because it's accessible to everyone. So we need to reframe how disability is in the community. And, you know, even if someone's impaired for a short time, they are deserving of support. They shouldn't be punished for, you know, having
Yeah.
nil disability.
Being different. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. That's spot on. Thank you very much, Andrew. Well said. Moving on to the next question. So just 1 second. Sorry, Andrew. So how can listeners? Now we've gone through that question.
How financial.
Oh, okay, so yeah, what are your final thoughts on the matter, Andrew?
It's hard because when this passed, I in particular experienced a lot of stress with this bill passing because I know who this bill's going to target in particular. And it's moving Australia backwards in terms of disability rights and disability justice and disability inclusion. And I do think this bill is going to be Robo-Debt 2.0, where people are going to be irreparably harmed by this. Able-bodied people as well who will lose their jobs and not be able to participate anymore. This doesn't just affect disabled people, but disabled people are going to experience the most harm. And unfortunately, this seems to be par for the course where we have well-meaning politicians, especially those that claim that they're left-leaning, putting in policies that harm communities like ours. Like, this isn't the first time Labor's done this. They put in those restrictive lists to apply for the disability support pension, and we're still suffering under that. And we need able-bodied people to actually give a shit about us and to say, hey, this isn't the society we live in. And a lot of people think, especially now, that the biggest thing of a society is how much money we make or how much the economy produces. But what determines a civilization, what I learned from history and from that word is how we determined civilization was when we found someone had set a broken bone and mended someone back to life so that they could participate again. And we need to look at how we as a society help those who are most vulnerable, help those that need the help, not, how much money we can make off these people or how much money we can cut from these people because we want to fund a genocide somewhere or we want to fund, we want to get back in black or something. Stuff your surplus if you can't look after the most vulnerable people in society. Who cares about your surplus, So, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite distressing, and it does anger me when you say profit over people, because these are people's lives we're talking about, and they need to be valued. And I don't think any profit would, would enable these people to live the lives they want. But in saying that, Australia is so far behind, and they need to catch up, with the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I was just thinking of what my life was before the NDIS. I was bedbound. I couldn't go out. I couldn't go out with friends. I couldn't do community activities even. The NDIS for me was life-changing. And to face possible removal from the scheme is frightening, having to go back to that life where, I'll be stuck in bed all day again, So
you don't want to, I guess, go back to that situation. It does limit, the life before the NDIS, it did limit me in some ways, limit me from doing stuff. But thanks to the NDIS, it's created that sense of independence. It's allowed me to, make decisions for myself. It's helped me to connect with a lot of people. And so we need to continue to do that. We need to encourage, our community and also our people to be leaders, for themselves and for their community as well. Because that's what the NDIS is all about. Helping, people become independent with the laws that they're decision making. So what's stopping us?
Yeah.
We've got to keep this going. But anyways, Jonathan, do you have anything you want to add?
This people with disabilities are not economic burden. If we are given the right support, we can enhance society. We can
For sure.
create value. We just need to be viewed as more than just a cost. What is the cost of inaction? Why are we being relegated to the free NDIS situation where we need to fight for our basic needs?
Yes.
Exactly.
Well said, John. It's about shifting from the medical model to the more social model. And how do we make people feel included and part of the community? Thank you, John. David, do you have anything you want to add?
David.
So I'd like to thank you. No, he's gone. He's those off. He's yeah. He's anyway. Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights about the NDIS reform bill and your thoughts on it. It's always great to have you on the show, and we look forward to having you on the show in the future. Thank you very much,
Cheers.
Andrew, for joining us,
Thanks,
and
Ibby.
thank you everyone else.
Oh,
Yep.
sorry, I was just
Go
going
ahead.
to say, everyone just try and join your local disability advocacy org, and let's put the power to the people, back to the people. So
Well, no, I've said it better myself. You've heard it from Andrew. Get out there and support. Meet the leaders within your community. That's very awesome, Andrew. Thank you. And you've been watching CripChat. Waiting for